Dear listeners, I have so much to tell you, and I often don't know where to start. It seems the world doesn't want to admit that sometimes we make mistakes and that sometimes the wrong person gets punished for something they didn't do. Not all of us have been personally affected, but many of us have been impacted by this reality. And I feel like it's my responsibility to share these stories with you and to tell you what I've learned about wrongful convictions. Welcome back, and today I am joined again by Jia Rizvi. Last time, Jia spoke about how her journey into this crazy world of wrongful convictions began with a fundraiser, a viral t shirt, and a deep emotional connection to the case of Adnan Saeed. Today, we pick up where we left off, diving deeper into her powerful work documenting the story of Exoneree Jeff Deskovic. Today, I'll talk to Gia about the ethics of storytelling, the responsibility of getting it right, and the decision to make her film independently in order to preserve the truth of Jeff's case. We'll discuss the challenges of telling stories that don't have tidy endings, the behind the scenes reality of what it takes to get a documentary made, and we'll also talk about the emotional weight that comes with attending the Innocence Conference, which is an important event where hundreds of exonerees and advocates come together to reflect, to support one another, and to push for change. Today, we'll have a conversation about integrity, impact, and the invisible threads that connect us to one another through the pursuit of justice. Welcome back, and thank you again, Gia, for joining me. And I'm hoping that today we can talk a little bit more about your work because as I was thinking about what we spoke about last time, it really struck me that you basically got into filmmaking because of wrongful convictions.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, yes, I did. Absolutely. 100%. I didn't even have the thought in my mind ever to go into filmmaking, ever in my life. It wasn't a thing I'd even considered as a career.
That is amazing to me. And that is exactly why I am loving doing this podcast because I'm just having conversations with people who have been exposed to wrongful convictions. And it's areas that, you wouldn't even necessarily naturally associate with it, right? And it's like it just seeps into so many different fields. And I just love this so much that, like for me, I was just a student and my background was English and humanities. Like it was not at all legal studies. And then somehow I got sucked into this vortex. So here you are with me. It's fabulous. Um, so we were talking last time about your work on the documentary about Jeff Deskovic's case. And one thing I was wondering about, because I've often heard from exonerees, is kind of I don't know what the word is, like the mantra or the one thing they say over and over again that the exonerees say is, don't talk about us without us. That
Mhm.
so many of them have their stories taken from them
Mhm.
and then told by somebody from their point of view that doesn't reflect the exoneree's experience, right?
Right.
Because the person telling the story is trying to spin like a specific narrative.
Mhm.
So, how did you approach Jeff's case and kind of navigate your telling of Jeff's case while letting him tell his own story, basically?
So this is why I love documentaries so much. And also I will say that the entire film is told in Jeff's voice, the entire thing. There's no narrator, there's no anything else. And the other people involved, like Nina Morrison, who was a lawyer who when he got free, like she's the one who was representing him at the time and who gave him the news, and anyone else that was actually involved is actually interviewed about their experience. But secondly, when I got into filmmaking, I was told by numerous people, this is not an industry that you can break into midlife. Like it is, it's something people work at from when they're 17, 18 years old and, and work their way up. You have to be a PA and you have to go get coffee for everyone and all this stuff forever and ever. And I thought, well, there's no way I have time to do any of that stuff, nor am I going to do that stuff. And so I made the film myself. My husband and I funded it, and so we didn't go to any production company for the sole reason that, well, one, obviously, it would have been a much tougher thing to get started with if I went that
Mm,
route, but secondly, it would have been easier because we would have had funding, but tough to get that funding in the first place. The
sure.
sole reason I did that is because what I noticed on TV is documentaries have changed, and a lot of them are sensationalized, and a lot of them have the details embellished. And I hate that more than anything. I feel like the stories are so personal. There's a victim and a victim's family involved that may or may not want the story told at all. Like maybe the person
Yep.
wrongfully convicted does, but not the other side, most likely. Um, and so for it to not be sensationalized and for it to really stick to the facts, I think is, to me, very, very, very important. And I realized right in the beginning that if I went through a production company or anyone else to tell this story, that I would be putting my name on something that was going to be somewhat sensationalized, somewhat embellished, somewhat, you know, altered from the true facts and events. And I didn't want my name on a documentary like that, especially it being my very first one, my introduction into this new
Sure.
industry. And so that's why I made it myself. And I made sure that I just stuck to the facts. So everything is right out of the court documents, the police reports, the people that were actually there. They're speaking for themselves. And there isn't one fact in there that has been embellished or changed in any way. And I feel like that's all I could do. That was like all I could do to honor the story and the integrity of it.
Do you think that approach, because I have to say, it's in many ways very unique in a really good way, because I've seen a lot of stories hijacked and a lot of productions done, and the exonerees are like, "Do not support that, do not watch that, do not download it."
Yes,
You know what I mean? Because they're incensed
that's happened to
by
Jeff before.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so you had this desire to be true to his story, and do you think that is kind of, do you think that comes from your experience watching and seeing how Adnan's case was handled? Right? Like that, you knew what really was infuriating about the case, and so you want to just present that as is. It doesn't need embellishment because it's so infuriating on its own.
That's exactly why. That's it. That's exactly why. These stories don't need to be changed. They're already unbelievable as they are, as they happened. But for sure, Adnan's case too, like Serial was such a great podcast, and the storytelling, the quality of storytelling was just unreal. Everybody
Yep.
was hooked. The world was hooked. I was hooked. But they did get a few things a little bit wrong and a little bit
Uh,
off, and that really bothered me because I thought, and I won't get into the details of it, but like there was a couple of things where it was like, "Oh, if that was presented a little more factually, then the
mm.
audience, when you have the world captivated, they would have had a slightly different opinion because you're kind of controlling their opinion at this point in the way that you present it, right?" And, so I didn't want any part of that. I wanted it to just be presented as it is, and then, people have their opinions and take away what they take away from the facts, and
And
that's it.
this is so commendable. Like honestly, I'm really taken by this because, and like you said, when you're telling this story, you are, or you not you are, you have the potential to make up people's minds for them, right? That in how you present the facts. And so to make that deliberate decision or that conscious decision of no, we're going to present it exactly the way it was in, court transcripts or in, you know, n- police notebooks or whatever it may be, right? Is really commendable because I think at the end, people are left to 100% make up their own mind, that they're not being fed a narrative that they're supposed to follow one way or the other.
Right, right. It's interesting because I just finished the feature film. It's called 16 Years, and it's a longer version. It's Jeff's whole story, and it really dives much deeper into the justice system and the shortcomings of it, and kind of every step of the way how wrongful conviction stays in place, and how DNA testing is denied, and why, and how does this go on for so long, and people lose decades of their lives. So it was really fascinating to dig into it deeply. But there are things in the feature film when you watch it that don't paint Jeff in a great light always. And even he was like, "It's fine. It's what was there, like the NYPD." I mean, it doesn't actually, if you know once you know the whole story, it's not reflective of Jeff. But the NYPD had a criminal profile, and they wrote all these not nice things, and they said that he fit that profile, and so they were saying that that was Jeff, right? Not just that they thought he was the perpetrator, but they thought all those traits and qualities were attributed to him, which is not great. But it's in the film because that's actually just what happened, and even he was fine with it. So I was really lucky to be working with someone like him who was very okay with it being presented just the way it was, whether it looks bad or not.
And I'm sure he's just appreciative that the story is told the way it happened, and for you to twist that and make it more favorable to him, well, then you're doing the same thing. You're making things more sensational.
Yeah.
Sure, it's in his favor, but it's still, you're doing the same thing that you didn't want to do. Not that you did
Right.
that, but had
Right.
you done that, right? Like, you would
Right.
have been guilty of doing exactly what you were
Yes.
trying not to do.
It's unfortunate because lots of documentaries out there right now do that. And then you'll see another documentary will be made to show you the other side of it, you know? And that's not
Yes.
what truly documentaries are supposed to be. You're supposed to be a journalist that is documenting something, and that is it, right? You're just supposed to be like a fly on the wall. You're not supposed to have a narrative going in. And you asked me something earlier and I was going to say this, but that's what was fascinating is going in and just interviewing everybody and not having a story written and then watching the interviews and then picking out what the story is rather than writing a story and then going to film it. I really love that process of just talking to people and seeing what the story is on the back end rather than going in with an
And,
agenda.
having just defended my PhD dissertation, I was going to say that's exactly, like, you're doing qualitative research and you're just presenting it
Yes.
in a video format instead of like in a written format, right? Because I did the
Yes.
same thing. I went out and I interviewed post conviction defense counsel. I had no idea what I was going to get from them. And
Yeah.
then it was, you go through all the transcripts and you figure out, okay, what is the narrative that's being told across these interviews, right? And
That's
so
right.
it's just fascinating that that's, more or less the same approach that you took. Is that, I don't want to say normal, like, is that standard in filmmaking, or do you normally have, this is the story and I'm gonna find the clips to support the story that I've written?
It's really interesting because I've only done these one short and then this one feature. And because they were indie films, I didn't work with a production company. I don't really know the answer to that question.
Ah,
What I do know is I went to film school. And in film
yep,
school, they taught us that this is the way. Like a documentary is journalism work, and it's not the other way. But
right.
my hunch is, from what I see coming out of like Hollywood, that it's the other way around.
Sure. I tend to agree with you, and I have zero clue when it comes to filmmaking. But because you get these highly produced, they're supposed to be documentaries, docuseries, call it what you will, but there's like a start, a middle, and an end always, and it's linear and it follows this trajectory, this narrative, call it what you will, and it's like they're telling a story and they're making a point and they're sure to make that point and make sure the point lands at the end, right? Whereas if you're going out and saying, I'm just talking to these people and I have no idea what I'm going to end up with, you know?
But, I don't know that that would necessarily prove that they're doing that because
Ah,
they get presented only less than 1% of films that ever are made end up on a streaming platform. So
wow.
99 point something percent of them don't ever make it and we'll never see them. And it's
Wow.
because if a story doesn't have, and they teach this in school, the story arc. If it doesn't have
Sure.
a good, beginning, middle, and end, it'll
Yep.
never see the light of day. And so the
Fair.
stories you're
Fair.
seeing are the ones that got pitched and they were like, okay, yes, people will consume this because there is a good start, middle, and end. If there
Right.
wasn't, they would be like, "Sorry, you don't really have a story here. Like, while we love
Right.
it and it's interesting, there is no way to end this story, so we can't make it." because that's what the consumer wants. The consumer doesn't want to watch something for, especially if they binge watch something for
Yeah.
8, 10 episodes, and they're like, wait, there was no ending? Like people would be livid, right? So that's a sad thing sometimes with these stories, especially with wrongful convictions, because I'll get asked by families and people who are wrongfully incarcerated if I would tell their story, and then I'll pitch it, and they're like, no, we're not interested in that story. And I feel really bad. But it's just if there isn't enough of a hook for an audience to get engaged, they're not gonna put their money and time and, you know, and
Yeah.
on their streaming
Well,
platform.
and I
There's
was going to say, so then if, you know, production companies are wanting an end, then to have the story of someone who's claiming to be wrongfully convicted still in prison, but not yet exonerated, then there's not really an end yet to that story, is there?
yes, that's
Right?
very
Which makes it difficult
yes.
to tell.
Yes, because then as a documentarian, you end up filming them for 10, 15 years until there is an end, and
Yes.
then you can maybe get it somewhere, but you end up just filming, and a lot of
That's
documentaries make that commitment. I think, the women who did Making a Murderer, the first one, didn't they film for something like 10
it.
plus? I think it was over 10 years,
I
because
think so.
yeah, yeah, I mean, he and Stephen Avery's still in prison, but they filmed him for a long, long time.
And I can't remember who is doing Tyra Patterson's documentary, but it's the same thing that they have followed her for
Right.
8, 9, 10 years now.
Yeah, and
Same
that
thing
happened.
as she's fighting to clear her name, which is huge commitment on everyone's part, right?
Yes,
And you really
yes,
hope there is a happy ending to that series when it all comes
yes.
down.
Yeah, you get married to these stories, so it's, like, hard you can't kinda abandon them when you're partway through at that point.
Indeed. So you have done just basically the documentary and now the feature film on Jeff's case, and that's been most of your focus in the filmmaking industry.
Mhm.
So commendable. Um, Beyond that, do you have you're saying now you know like 40 exonerees. Like, do you have connections to the innocence community now that you've been working in this
Yes.
area?
Yes, so much. Yes, I worked with the Innocence Project here in New York to film the feature film. So a lot
Oh,
of it is
okay.
shot in their offices, and, they actually they've been so wonderful. They found the letters that Jeff had been writing when he was a teenager and onwards to get people to look at his case, and they
Oh,
actually found the handwritten letters in their, like, storage somewhere and gave them to me, and I filmed them, and they're in the film, and then, of course, they have them now. But I literally documented every single page of those. Like they've been so wonderful. So yes, and it's not just the Innocence Project, it's many other innocence organizations that I have great relationships with and that I'm working with now to actually find the next story to film is through some of these organizations and attorneys that I
that's
know.
amazing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you recently attended the Innocence Conference?
I did, yes.
And have you attended previously as well, or is this your first one?
I had. This was my third year going. Yes, and then they just had a gala here that I also went to, and then the Deskovic Foundation had a gala. So this last month was a lot of these events, but yeah, they're really beautiful. It's so many
Uh,
exonerees
I
there.
was gonna say, so what draws you to the Innocence Conference?
You know, the Innocence Conference, I will tell you this, what draws me is the work that all these people are doing, and they're all in one place for once, the attorneys, the all kinds of people that work in this space are all in one under one roof, which is just magical. It's great. But most of all, you touched on this before, is the exonerees. I have never met anybody in my life that has a mentality of these people I know that are exonerated. They have this understanding of the meaning of life and are so appreciative and have gratitude and no BS and no hangups, and they have PTSD and things like that, but as far as human relations and how they treat people and how grateful they are to have good people in their life, I've never met anyone like them. And so for me, that energy that's in these spaces all the time is so wonderful. I love every second of it. And that's what I love about the conferences, is because there's so many exonerees present, and then everyone else who wants to help the cause and help them, and it's just such a beautiful community. So it really, like, it's fulfilling, I find.
It is. It's something that I cannot put into words. When I try
Same.
to explain to other people, it's the most incredible place to be. It's the most incredible thing to experience. And, I tell everybody, I'm like, you really need to do it once in your life because you walk in. The first year I went, I sat at my breakfast table and I was in the room for about 3 minutes. And, they start the opening ceremony. I just start bawling. And,
Yes.
like, just I didn't even know I was crying, and, my husband looks at me, he goes, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm totally fine," and tears are just
Yeah.
streaming down my face, and I was like, "There is just so much love and so much pain in this one room, and I can feel it all."
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
that's
it's
exactly what it is. And when they do the introduction of the
oh,
exonerees, it's heartbreaking. And it's beautiful to see them there, and it's so nice that they're there, but it's always such a reminder of how many more are still incarcerated, so many more than will ever be out. And then when they do that total number of years that those
yes.
people spent incarcerated, it's an unbelievable number of years. Like this last time, it was 5,505 years collectively.
Yep.
It's hard to wrap your mind around it. So yeah,
Yeah, like, if you think in this one room tonight,
yes,
there's 5,500 wasted years.
yes.
Right? Like, just wrap your head around that
Yeah.
and, "Okay, have a good dinner."
I know,
Like
I know, I know, it's like, I don't know, and, like, I don't need to explain to you because you totally get it, but just their character and the people that they are is infectious, like, to be around them, I feel like
100%.
is, like, they do more for my life than I do for theirs, for sure, you know?
Well, and it's funny because the first year I went, I did it wrong, and, like, I flew in and, after a 21-hour travel day, had a 3 hour sleep, and then we did the conference for 2 days and then flew home, and I was so exhausted, right? I was like, "I'm not 20 anymore." And, and at the end of the conference, everybody's like, "Oh, I'm so invigorated." And I'm like, "Are you crazy? I'm so exhausted. Like, I'm going to keel over right now."
Yes, yes,
Having learned from my first experience, I give myself the day before and the day
yes,
after
the day
and,
before and
I'm
the day
more
after,
rested, and
always.
now I get it. I get to the end and I'm like, "I too am so invigorated and I
Yes,
wanna get out and I wanna spread the word and I wanna do what I can and I wanna talk to people and,
yes,
share what I know." And so here we are today and,
yep,
creating the podcast and getting the word out. And on that note, I see that we are at time. Once again, this has been so great and the time has flown by so quickly.
yes,
And I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to speak with me. This has been so enlightening and so interesting and so gratifying in many ways. Like just to hear another avenue that, wrongful convictions seeps into and can have really big impacts. And hopefully we can give back in the same way that they give to us.
absolutely. Thank you for having me. Seriously, it was such great conversation. We'll have to do it again sometime.
I would love to, absolutely. So, thank you, and, yeah, we'll definitely try to have another conversation.
Sounds good.
What an absolutely incredible conversation. I wanna thank Gia for joining me, not just for sharing her journey into filmmaking and advocacy, but for the sincerity, intentionality, and care she brings to every story she tells. Her commitment to honoring the voices of exonerees without embellishment, without sensationalism, is something we don't often see, and it's a powerful reminder of what ethical storytelling can and should look like. As we heard today, wrongful convictions don't just alter the course of one person's life, they ripple through families, communities, and time itself. And while the numbers, like those 5,500 years lost, can be staggering at times, it's the stories, the people, the faces, and the names that make this so very real. People like Jeff, people like Gia, people whose courage, resilience, and clarity force us to reckon with what justice really means and what it takes to get there. I hope this episode leaves you, as it did for me, inspired to think differently, to ask more questions, and to find your own way, whether it's big or small, to be part of this work. Because at the end of the day, wrongful convictions aren't just a legal problem, they're a human one. And while today's letter may have piqued your interest, this is only part of the story. There's still so much more to tell. The effects of wrongful convictions are far reaching. They touch us all. I'll write to you again soon as I continue my conversations with those whose lives have been impacted by a wrongful conviction. But until then, I remain wrongfully yours. If you have something that you want to talk about with me, or even if you want to just send me some words of encouragement, you can drop me a line at wrongfullyyourspodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out my website, kellylozon.ca, for more information about me and the kinds of things that I do. And if today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others, liking and following the podcast on your favorite platforms so you don't miss what comes next. And as always, thank you for listening to Wrongfully Yours, where we believe that telling these stories is the first step towards preventing the next injustice. And until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and keep fighting for justice.